the time. It was predicated on an initiative that Gregg undertook to align education governance and education responsibilities largely with what happens in Massachusetts. And to that extent, they put together a coalition of House and Senate members that promoted that, and those are some of the things that we're currently working with right now. So without further ado, I want to introduce the Secretary of State, Gregg Amore, former rep, which I've always appreciated his position, former civics teacher in the city of East Providence, a long-term educator, and a long-term friend.
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon. So for 27 years, I taught U.S. AP history and civics, and it was never good to teach a class after lunch. I never taught a class during lunch, so this is a new experience for me. I appreciate Tim's kind remarks, and I appreciate being here today. I recognize and know so many people in the room. I'm going to be a history teacher for the first part of my remarks, and then I'll move on to talk about our initiatives at the Rhode Island Department of State tied into education, and then I'll touch upon what Tim talked about, and that's the Education Accountability Act. So across the state and across the nation, the flags remain at half-staff in honor of Jimmy Carter. And Jimmy Carter's first elected position was that of a school board member in Plains, Georgia, a place he never left and a place that he left this world from, Plains, Georgia. In fact, school committee members have been elected to every position and office across the land, ironically, except for Secretary of State. No school committee member has ever been elected. That's not the truth, but I don't want anybody in here to get any ideas. I still am. First, I want to thank you for your commitment to public service and for serving your communities in a capacity that is really the foundation of the great democratic experiment. Your representation as a school committee member in many ways is more accountable to we the people than that of any other elected official. You have enormous responsibility in the continued stewardship of free American public school system that in large part was designed to advance good citizenship. You are, by the nature of your office, closer to and have a better understanding of your constituents than any elected official in the land. You have also been placed in the unenviable position of being the canary in the government coal mine. School committees have been on the front line of addressing the most controversial, emotionally charged, and important issues facing this nation since their broad inception in the 1870s. If it is not hard enough to make decisions around education policy, budgeting, school leadership, school committees have also been thrust into the most contentious national conversations, forcing them, in many cases, to be the first decision makers in tackling issues around religion, race, sexuality, and public health. The cultural history of the United States in the 20th and 21st centuries can be written and understood around analyzing the policies of school committees. And that is a powerful statement to your impact on not only your communities, but the nation at large. Whether it be in an argument over the teaching of the theory of evolution that played out on the national stage in 1925 during the famous Scopes trial, but had to be managed both practically and politically at the local level by school committees, or the Brown v. Board of Education decision that upended years of statutory and de facto segregation. School committees had to implement the on-the-ground policies and decision-making. And while places like Little Rock grabbed the nation's attention, every school committee in every part of this land faced unique decision-making around race, equity, and equal opportunities in classrooms. In the 1970s, school committees dealt with a significant change in civil rights law and the challenges around Title IX, both implementation and controversy. And as you well know, this subject has surfaced again in a way that very few could have imagined when the Title IX conversation began. To that point, this generation of school committee members face their own set of significant challenges associated with the modern culture wars, making decisions around the impact of a novel virus in a worldwide pandemic, where there was no playbook and every decision was ultra-scrutinized and continually second-guessed. And of course, There's the ongoing debate around parental rights in all aspects of public education, where schools are sometimes accused of everything from grooming to indoctrination. I do not envy the tremendous difficulty you all have when trying to balance the incredibly important and legitimate concerns parents have when they leave their children in the care of public schools, with sound education policies, support for professional staff, and attempting to do your job without prejudice or political agenda. That's tough stuff. You face the passion and anger and sometimes harassments of your constituents like no other local or state elected official, because you make policies that directly affect the most important thing in these people's lives, their children. So school committees remain the canaries in the American cultural coal mine and continue to be at the center of decision-making that impacts their communities and society at large. The liberal commentator Ezra Klein and the conservative commentator Ben Shapiro don't agree on anything, but they do agree on this, and they are quoted as such: "If you want to impact your community, run for your local school board." And that is absolutely true. With all that said, your primary responsibilities, managing a school budget, maintaining school infrastructure, and choosing the right district leadership, are monumental and present their own challenges. This is important work that goes underappreciated. I know that. I spent so many years in a public school classroom that I know the work you do goes underappreciated. So I ask your indulgence in allowing me a few moments to talk about my view of why public education is so important and why we as policymakers should focus on those important aspects. I'm going to start by paraphrasing from one of your own, the North Providence School Committee Chair, Dr. Frank Pallotta. I had the opportunity to be in attendance when North Providence School Committee was sworn in a few weeks ago, and I was impressed with Dr. Pallotta's remarks as he was able to boil down the essence of what public schools should be and the responsibilities policymakers have to that end. He said, and I wholeheartedly agree, that our public schools should be safe, welcoming, and well-maintained places with supportive professional staff who endeavor to offer educational opportunity to every student they encounter, no matter their ability. Dr. Pallotta said, importantly, schools and school districts should not be judged through a broad, dehumanizing lens of state star rating systems or incremental gains or losses on standardized tests. Amen. They should be judged based on the opportunities they are offering their students individually through academics, through extracurriculars, and a social setting. They should be judged on the environment they provide, the staff they employ, and the governance structure that can do everything it can to create those opportunities for those students to take full advantage of. It was a refreshing reminder of what really matters, and most importantly, what we can control when it comes to public policy around schools. There is so much you cannot control, and it's important for you to acknowledge that. So I thank Dr. Pallotta for letting me steal that and sharing it with you today. Public schools are the heartbeat of a community, and they reflect that community's successes and struggles. They are dynamic centers for civic engagement, of course, focused on learning, but offering so much more. Schools touch every demographic in a community. They are both a resource hub and a safe haven. They are incredible in the fact that they offer opportunity, but also human connection. They are places where we meet our mentors, role models, and lifelong friends, places we feel deeply connected to. When schools are at their best, they offer an environment where a student feels as though they belong, and that they have a caring and competent adult to lean on, hopefully more than one, to lean on for help, guidance, advice, instruction, or just a friendly face that knows their name and says, hello, good morning, how are you today? That has a powerful impact. Good schools are essential to the fabric of a functioning community and nation, and you have placed yourselves in the arena at the forefront of taking on the care of one of the most important institutions in maintaining American democracy, our public schools, which is a good segue into what we at the Department of State are doing around that. I have been in 80 schools across the state. Superintendent Montanez has been to a few of my lessons. I have delivered lessons on the history of voting rights in the United States and why it's so important to vote. Just the other day, I was in fifth grade classroom in Providence talking about democracy and what made democracy so special among all the governments in the world. From those classroom visits, especially the high school classroom visits, we are recruiting students to take part in the Rhode Island Civic Leadership Program, a cohort of 110 students from 45 high schools across the state who meet once a month across the school year and interact with state leaders, community leaders, corporate leaders, and members of the local media. They are engaged in panel discussions around what they have chosen as the most important topics of interest. This program culminates in a 3-day, 2-night summit where the students stay at the Providence Marriott, spend a day at the district court, have dinner with the judges that evening, a day among legislative leaders where they then mark up a bill in committee and debate an actual bill on the House floor. And by the way, we have participation from dozens of members of the legislature, both Democrats and Republicans. This is an incredibly bipartisan, nonpartisan effort on our behalf, and it will remain that way. They had the opportunity to ask direct questions of the general officers. Normally, general officers like me just like to speak at people. These students asked continuously good questions of these general officers and then stayed afterwards to ask more questions. All the while, these students, with the assistance of our staff and our teacher liaisons from around the state, complete a civic action project in their school community. And all of this is free of charge to the students. This program, which has been recognized by USA Today in last year's National July 4th issue, which focused on the preservation of American democracy, is supported through contributions from the Rhode Island Foundation, a number of corporate sponsors, labor unions, and individual donors. It is a nonpartisan program focused on introducing students to how their state government works and building the skills around civic engagement. Debate and discussion that revolves around the facts and evidence, avoiding the temptation to launch ad hominem attacks or trying to score cheap points by winning the moment rather than discussing a long-term solution. This should be about good faith, discussion, disagreement, teaching students to see the humanity in the person they may have fierce disagreement with, and giving them the tools to engage with respect, teaching them to listen, not just wait to talk, so that they can see the people they are disagreeing with are not their enemies, but their fellow Americans. We are attempting to build the bench of the next generation of Rhode Island political, corporate, nonprofit, and educational leaders. But most importantly, we are bringing students from Central Falls High School together with students from Barrington High School, students from Central High School in Providence with students from Westerly High School, students who may have never had the opportunity to discuss these issues with one another. They may have seen each other on the basketball court or the playing field, but to sit down and share their perspectives and their backgrounds with one another is a unique experience. How they learn to discuss public policy and interact with one another is a key tool in moving our nation away from the division and vitriol and toward a more perfect union. We are extraordinarily proud of this uniquely Rhode Island program, which serves to enhance the in and out of school learning for our students. So make sure you're aware of this program, your administrators are aware of this program. There have been a few schools that we have not had the opportunity to go to and speak to students. We are willing to go at any time to any district to do this and more. Our office also offers mock election opportunities where we will make the ballot for an elementary school, a middle school, a high school. We'll bring in and the ballot is the exact same ballot that you vote. We will bring in the voting machines, the actual voting machines, and we will conduct an election. I will go to an elementary school and talk about democracy. I'll go to a high school class and talk about the importance of voting. I will go anywhere to support Rhode Island's public education students. And by the way, this program is for public, private, and parochial students. And we have folks from St. George's, and we have folks from St. Raphael's, and we have folks from East Providence, which I have obviously biased toward, the best district in the state. And finally, let's talk about the 2019 Education Accountability Act, which I was proud to author, but as I was looking back on it preparing for today, I noticed that the other two authors on the House side of this bill were Joe Shikarchi and Chris Blazajewski. So this legislation is not going anywhere. It is solidly in the foundation of education policy in the state. It does a lot of things. One of the things it did was instituted a process to identify and implement high-quality curriculum. What we found during the process leading up to this bill was that, depending on the district's ability to pay for curriculum, they were taking what they could afford. And we wanted to put parameters around that and work with districts to make sure they implemented high-quality curriculum. And what we're seeing is that there now is a connection across the state so that the curricula in one district matches up at least in quality to that of the others. The other key part of this legislation was what some call principal empowerment, but I call site-based management, because it's incredibly important to point out that site-based management includes those professional staff in decision-making. In fact, the language around this part of the bill says participatory decision-making is required. So it's not that a principal is the king of their kingdom. It is that they must engage with the school improvement team to make decisions around implementing school policy. That is incredibly important to allow the people who know their schools the best to make key decisions around what will move that school forward, what will make that school a safer place, what will make that school a more welcoming place. Incredibly important. And I'm not sure that that aspect of this legislation has been fully embraced or implemented. I know it has been in some places, but not in others. In regard to your role was limited by this legislation. And originally, I had school committee members come to me and complain about this, and I'll read the line. It struck the language under duties and responsibilities of school committees that did at one time say to give advice and consent on the appointment by the superintendent of all school department personnel. That is stricken from the old language, and it does not give you the power to give advice and consent to the superintendent on all personnel. In fact, it narrows your duties to picking the right superintendent so that that superintendent makes those professional decisions. Now, early on, school committee members complained to me, oh, this is taking our power away. But today, when I run into school committee members, they say, thank you. I no longer have to field calls from people who are looking for a job. I no longer have to field calls from my cousin who wants his wife to have the job as a teacher's assistant. I no longer have to make decision or put myself in the middle of decision-making about the appointment of a basketball coach, the decisions around school leadership. Those are big issues. You don't need the other noise. And so I think that aspect of the law is really important. But there's something else, and I think it's the most important aspect of this legislation. And that's that it allows decision-making on personnel at the school level. Now, you can't violate an existing contract. But I think over the course of the years, what you have seen is when there's an opening at a school, that school can determine who fills that opening. It is no longer determined by seniority, by a teacher just bidding into a different school. Now, if there is nowhere for that teacher to go, that's the only open job, and that teacher is still a qualified teacher, they're going to be placed there. But the school has the decision in every other case, and that goes from a teaching position to a person who is a custodian. That's incredibly important, that the school has a decision-making ability in that area. And seniority, which used to be prominently part of just about every contract, is now becoming less and less of an issue. It is a tiebreaker in most cases and not a determining factor. That sounds funny coming from me, who is backed by every labor union in the entire state of Rhode Island. I was on the board of directors of the East Providence Education Association. I negotiated contracts for the East Providence Education Association. I am a labor guy. But this isn't about labor. This is about putting the best teachers and professional staff in front of our students, and that there's accountability at the site-based level. This bill, this law, has a chance to really make a difference in Rhode Island education. And I can tell you, because I am in schools, as I've mentioned, that it has not been implemented fully. And that there is pushback from all levels, but mostly from levels at the superintendent level, who do not want to give up some of the power that they have around school management. I think if we move, and by the way, this costs nothing. This is education policy that costs nothing. But I think if we move to fully implementing and embracing and refining and improving the Education Accountability Act, we will be in a much better place to compete in the years to come. So to conclude, I just want to thank you for what you do. This is a thankless job, and I know that. And I've been to a number of school committee meetings, and no matter what community you are representing, there are folks in that community who are not pleased with you. And it's very rare that you walk into a store or supermarket and someone says, "Great to see you, thank you for the work you are doing." And so I know that. And because of what I mentioned previously, that you are closer to your constituents than any other elected official, you do see them. You do see them. I can escape, especially now. I can kind of escape. I walk out and I say, I have to be somewhere. But you cannot escape. You open your door, and there they are, putting the trash out. And you really are in a unique position, but you're also in a position to enact real change and have a long-term impact on the families of your community and those students. So thank you for your attention and your engagement. It's an honor to speak to you today.